Hi, everyone, and welcome to Counterstream, the monthly podcast where we present you major news shaping the world, which are not represented in the mainstream media. We bring you critical perspectives on the biggest events shaping our reality. I am Noor, your host, and I'm here with my amazing co host, Juliana. Today, we're starting with a look back at the state of the world in 2024, from protests like the pro EU uprising in Georgia and student protests in Serbia to bigger events like the start of a new Trump era in the US and the fall of Assad regime in Syria and other major events here and there. So let's jump in and get started. In 2024, Georgia saw a huge protest as people stood up for their desire to join the European Union. It started when the government introduced a controversial foreign agents bill that many felt was a step toward authoritarian rule. Things got even worse when the ruling Georgian Dream Party announced that it was suspending talks to join the EU until 2028. This sparked outrage, and for 5 nights, tens of thousands of people filled the streets of Tbilisi. They clashed with riot police, and protesters waved EU flags and demanded change. Let's have a look at this video.
Georgia says 21 police officers have been injured in pro-EU demonstrations on Sunday. The unrest was triggered by the Prime Minister's announcement on Thursday that he would suspend Georgia's bid to join the EU.
So, Juliano, I don't know what you think about these protests, or what do these protests say about this growing conflict that people are pushing for European integration and government moving toward authoritarianism. What do you think of all that?
On one hand, I think it's super interesting whenever people stand up for their rights. I think that's always a good sign that people are alert to what's happening to them. On the other hand, also in the case of Georgia or any country that is in this, that is struggling like in this position where they are crushed against two powers. Like you have the pull of Russia on the one hand, and then you have the pull of the West on the other hand. And I mean, being in the EU, you look at people who want to join the EU, and I don't know if that's something to aspire for in this situation where the EU is in, because it doesn't really, I mean, it's maybe better than Russia, but the EU is not a perfect institution. It's a very undemocratic institution. And I mean, here in DM, we have plenty of analysis of what's wrong with the EU. So although I can understand that that's kind of the lesser evil that people want, but I think in many countries, like also the country where I'm from, North Macedonia, people have a quite different view on the EU. That's kind of still this romanticizing of what it is, which is it is actually not. So it's good to see people stand up. I'm curious how this will develop in Georgia. I think countries in the future need more to stand for, I mean, how we say in DM, more for non-alignment and more for their own interest than trying to be part of any of those superpowers who are really not looking after people.
But do you think there is a chance for like a kind of independence where they are not too much aligned with EU or policies or the government? Is this something that is somehow achievable, or
I think there is a big price you pay for being part of any big union like the EU, and of course, maybe the upside to it is, if there are regulations which say you have to have lesser corruption, you have to, there are certain rules you have to follow, but also the West especially is known for upholding those politicians who are going after their own interests. So if the government makes it easy for the EU to maintain their interests in the region, they will also overlook corruption. That's the problem. So those who will be struggling in the end are always the people. So right now, I think we we have a conflict of interest when it comes to people and governments in general. So, as I say, it's mostly being part of the lesser evil in a certain situation. Of course, you have to listen to the people living there. So Georgia has a history with Russia, which is not very, which is pretty devastating. So I think that that the memory of something in the past is what makes them go to the streets and be like, we don't want that. So we rather go here than go back to the influence of Russia in Georgia.
Okay, let's try to move on to a different topic. What's happening in Serbia, which is similar and not necessarily similar, different and similar somehow. We have also protests there, student rallies against what some of the media is saying is like they are a protest against violations of civil rights under the current government. Some protests are claiming that there are issues that should be discussed, like freedom of speech, media censorship, so many other topics, and students are demonstrating and demanding that their voices that should be heard and that their basic rights should be protected. What do you think of that?
I mean, there were kind of many waves of protests in Serbia, right? So when the school shooting happened sometime before people hit the streets, the most important part of the story now is that there was this accident at the train station where kind of some part of this roof fell and 15 people or so died, and this happened due to Chinese construction, which the government had made some deal with the Chinese that they will build some structures. And now there is the question of the quality of what they're building. So I think for the people, it's they're realizing that their government is making deals with other countries, but not in the interest of the people. So there has been a huge debate about corruption in Serbian politics. Vucic is by far not the he's a very populist politician. So I think the youth in Serbia is just fed up by this kind of government. And also there, it's a very positive sign that people are standing up for their own rights. I think those are two good examples, different reasons, but still good examples of the system, pushing people to the edge, where they're like, wait a minute, this cannot go on like this. And when people die because as a consequence of bad politics, unfortunately, that's a huge trigger, of course.
Okay, before we turn to Germany, Europe, and other parts of Europe, maybe we can talk a little bit about the economic situation in general. A lot of economists seem to agree on that the world is heading toward a kind of recession, and we're already seeing the effects of what's being called a war economy. There are rising global tensions, high inflation, and so many other things that can relate to economy. There are disruptions in food supply. There are so many impacts on global trade. There are sanctions because of Russia's invasion to Ukraine. So how do you see that? Where are we heading in terms of economy?
I think it's fair to say that so many genius minds from economics have said that we are kind of at late stage of capitalism, and it's obvious that it's so. And in my view, I think it's this kind of capitalism that we had for a long time now. It works like who comes first gets more. Previous generations have taken the chairs, and those chairs are seated now. So later generations, like my generation or even the younger ones, are struggling now to get by in capitalism because housing is so expensive, because payment is bad. The classical jobs like teachers and working in the health system are struggling to find people to work for because it's not paid well. Inflation is really bad, is beating people up. We see that people are struggling with the basics, and therefore dissatisfaction is going up a lot. And I mean, here in Germany, and that's an old analysis, the model of cheap energy prices, of having migrants doing jobs for low payment, was what was upholding the economy, and that's gone now. And now you see kind of the consequences of that. So I think it will get much, much worse before it ever gets better. I've heard this term kind of hyper normalization recently, which just means that everyone is just going on as if nothing is happening. And I think we are in that phase right now.
Yeah, adding to that as well, there's the government's focusing so much on military spending instead of focusing on what people want or what people need, which often means, less money for the things that people need and require, like healthcare, education, and social services. And most of the money is going to, funding countries who are fighting. So that's really, really sad. Maybe we can now turn to Germany and the major events that are happening in Germany now. Germany has been in the spotlight lately with a mix of saddening, confusing, and troubling events at the same time. One big issue that maybe we can discuss at the beginning is the upcoming elections and the state of the parliament. Chancellor Olaf Scholz recently faced criticism for his leadership, especially after the collapse of his coalition government in 2024. And this has, of course, led to early elections in 2025. At the same time, we see the AfD, the Alternative for Germany, has been gaining attention and with their controversial extreme policies and views. And it seems like they are, I don't know how to say this, trying to position themselves as, or maybe more centrally in the political landscape. And they are aiming to attract, maybe particularly at this time, more mainstream support while still holding to their own extreme views. Personally, I find that the rise of the AfD is pretty concerning, especially in these times. It feels like Germany is becoming more divided, and I'm really worrying that the if we can say there is some kind of progress that Germany has achieved regarding inclusivity, for example, and being inclusive, and this is at risk now with so much political instability, so much polarization. And one of the biggest issues today with the AfD is their approach to migration. They are also pushing to Dexit, which is Germany exiting the EU, which could create a lot of problems, economic and political problems, not just for Germany, for Europe as a whole. There could be an economic crisis and political impact, not to mention, of course, consequences on Germany's relationship with other European countries. So Dexit could, I think, lead to different problems like economic instability, and it can absolutely weaken the European Union. So I don't know, what do you think about these new policies, these new events, and the idea of Dexit in general, and how it will maybe affect Germany in the future?
Starting with Brexit, the EU will be done if Germany leaves the EU. They have the most parliamentarians in the EU Parliament. For better or for worse, they have shaped the EU together with France and at some point with the UK. No doubt, if Germany leaves the EU, that's it. That this project is done, in my opinion, and it's already at its. It never took off in the direction that it should have, and we are already running towards the EU crumbling as a union. But if Dexit would happen, I don't see it standing anymore. But I believe that, and the AfD started as a Dexit party. That was kind of during the EU crisis. The AfD came to life, and at the beginning, it was based on economical analysis of the EU. And those members who created the AfD at that time, nobody of them is still in the AfD because the AfD drifted away from its original purpose. Also, I'm kind of doubting that Dexit is really something that is interesting for them because right now the EU Parliament is pretty right wing. There is no real reason for them to go out of the EU because they have a lot of allies in there. It's the same with Meloni in Italy. She also had this rhetoric of, yeah, well, Italy should leave the EU. And now she's very comfy in the EU because she has a lot of allies. So I don't see that happening, to be honest. But the AfD, the rise of the AfD is absolutely concerning. And I fear that we're sleepwalking, really, really sleepwalking into a disaster if people don't wake up to the fact that the AfD is not what they like it to be. That's the biggest issue, in my opinion.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But I have a question here, or maybe something I'm wondering here is why would they bring this topic up if they don't have it in mind? What kind of mentality? Why is this being brought up so often recently?
Part of their strategy is just to hate on things. You hate on migrants, you hate on the EU, you hate on the Greens, you hate on the CDU, you hate on everything. And you will always find people who are angered enough about some particular thing to believe that you are the solution because you get them, right? Yeah, I hate the EU as well. Their strategy right now is just because they are so up high in the polling. I think that what their goal is to try to pass the CDU in those next 6 weeks. And their strategy is just shoot at everything. And they also said at their, Congress on the weekend that they will focus on attacking the CDU now. Now you will see the battle of right-wing conservatism and fascism jumping at each other's throats to prove who's the bigger asshole. I'm sorry, but it's the truth. So, so I think that's tragedy. I mean, they also say a lot of stuff which is way more harmless than what their program or what their members have said. So it's both. They are saying things that might not be in their interest, and the other way around. They are kind of hiding their interest as well at the same time.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think it's part of their campaign. The elections are very soon. So, yeah, I absolutely agree. One very sad incident in Germany took place in December 2024 is the Magdeburg Christmas market attack. It was a tragic event. A man drove a car into a crowded Christmas market, and this has led to multiple deaths and many, many people injured. When I was reading about the man who committed this attack, I was shocked to know that he did not do this out of religious motivation, which was very shocking to me, as we often see with some extremist Islamist groups or people, but this time because of his atheist views. This really stood out to me because it challenges the common narrative that these kind of people or attacks are always connected to religion. And I want to be clear here, I'm not underestimating the danger or the threat of any Islamist extremist ideas. This time it isn't about religion as much as it is about something else. So maybe it shows how important for us to address the sources of violence instead of just focusing on religion and connecting religion to the violence, and not just focusing on, as I said, ideology or any belief system. What do you think of that, Juliana?
Killing people in general, uh, you need to have a certain state of mind to do that. That's not natural. Like killing yourself is not natural. There is something mentally different to like a normal person who would really struggle to kill themselves, for example, because that is kind of a kamikaze situation where you're not committing something like this, not being ready to suffer the consequences of either being shot or either die at the end or being arrested and spend the rest of your life in jail. So this is extremism, and this has, in my opinion, never something to do with religion or with ideology in that sense, but it has something to do with being an extremist. So labeling it as what not Islamistic or Christian or whatever, extremism is pointless because it's extremism that which is the problem at the end. So of course you have different groups. I mean, you don't have just religious groups. People kill for money, people kill for all sorts of things. Money is also religion if you want. So what we can see in our society is that there is a rise of extremism. With this, what happened in the Christmas market, I still struggle to figure out what his goal was. What was his message? And maybe there was none. Maybe we are trying to impose something on the situation where just somebody who's psychologically not well has made a decision and has done something which we try to give a meaning.
I like your idea that maybe we are imposing something on it, but at the same time, there is a repetition, a kind of a pattern that is being repeated over and over again in different places in the world under the name of Islam, whether atheism coming from a kind of Muslim or background or whatever, or whether it's pure religion. For me, it's not about imposing meaning as much as about thinking really this kind of violence, where is it coming from and why is it coming and why is it happening? Is it purely religious, or is it like does it have a political aspect that is hidden from the view? There are so many problems that are happening in the world, Middle East, I don't know where, and things are connected. So when we see something that is happening here and there, people usually think about, oh, here is this one incident. But actually, I think one should look at the bigger picture where things are connected. Yes, there is one crazy person, I don't know, psychologically unstable person who has done this criminal thing, but at the same time we have the political bigger view where we know how countries are fighting and we know what's happening, for example, at this moment in the Middle East, in Africa, in so many other countries in the background. But we are used to thinking very, narrowly, where we focus on small things. What I'm trying to say is that I do agree with you that maybe we are imposing some kind of meaning here, but at the same time, there is another meaning somewhere behind.
We are living in a very violent world right now. So I'm not surprised if people turn to violence, because everything is right now violence. Police used to think twice before beating somebody up, but they don't anymore. It's just part of society. Wars are booming right now. Movies are violent. Everything is violent. Violence, violence. I mean, I'm not wondering why people are so messed up, because we haven't built a society in the recent years based on pacifism and being nice to each other. Everything is just hate and violence. So I'm not that's no surprise that people also tend to go then to extremist groups. Yes, there's terrorism. I don't think we should say there is no terrorism, but there's different kinds of terrorism. There are groups who are preying on the young to make them part of their groups, and they're brainwashing people. All of those things are real, but I think the bigger connection is that we kind of settled in the society to solve things with violence all the time. Society has pushed young people into extremism by not being very mindful about what we propagate, what we consume as a society. All of these things, I think, play into that. And I mean, every religion can be violent. It depends on who preaches the religion, right?
Yeah, adding to this, one last thing before we move on to another topic. As you said, every religion, every belief system can be violent. But let's add to that if we're talking about Islam, and I'm going to be very completely honest here, if we're talking about the Middle East, since of course Islam exists in different places in the world, but mainly in the Middle East, the situation there is catastrophic, is disastrous. And for example, if we talk about areas around Lebanon, Syria, Palestine, Israel, I don't know, these countries, we have authoritarianism, you have colonialism, we have so many things. What are we expecting from the people who are there, who are impoverished, not educated, not getting any wide material conditions? If you push people to the extremes where they don't have education, we don't have any suitable conditions for living, people will turn to that. That is not disconnected from the whole thing. We want peaceful religions, we want peaceful regions. We need to think about the politics that's happening there and what kind of problems that are happening there. If we will continue agreeing on the attacks on Gaza, for example, or any other attacks or any other authoritarian regimes there, then we will need to accept that this is a very natural result. This is a result that's not something unexpected. It's very expected. If this happens, we will have this. These are very connected to each other. Yes, that's not okay. That is absolutely unaccepted, neither here in Germany, in Europe, or any other place in the world. But let's not fool ourselves with the thing that we always say to ourselves, that the religion only and in itself is violent or is stupid or whatever. I'm not saying that all religions are the same. That's another thing that can be discussed. But I'm also not saying that there's no violence that comes from any belief system, no matter what it is or where it is. one should need to think about where the violence is coming from, or where any the aggressiveness or the hostility that's coming from. And there should be a political aspect of that regarding that.
I think that in the Middle East, probably, like if you see it Iran or so, they are exploiting their religion for power, right? So they are living the religion in their interpretation, so they can shape society based on how to maintain power the longest. I mean, one part that comes to everyone's mind is kind of the oppressive state in which women are in those highly religious Islamic countries, which has also a lot to do with power, less than just having this view of women. I mean, it can be fundamentally religious, the view, of course, but I think on the longer term, if you see like Iran in the 70s, our old neighbor used to be from Iran, and he was he showed me pictures of the 70s, and I was like, wow, that's kind of a completely different society, right? And now it is something completely different, and has everyone hostile in the system. If you have like 50% of, if you take the rights away of 50% of the people, which is women, um that's also part of maintaining power.
Yeah, absolutely. I absolutely agree. And I always saw these pictures and I was amazed when I saw them. We can move now to another topic and another major event. We saw last month the fall of Al-Assad regime in Syria, and this was absolutely shocking to many people. Something no one has expected. Nobody really expected such a great event to happen. Some political analysts actually believe that it was something that has been worked on for a while. Other analysts and other people thought, no, it was more of a consequence of a series of events, like, for example, the tensions that started from October 7th in Gaza, and then the attacks in Lebanon, and then the weakening of Iran's influence in the region. But of course, no matter what the reasons behind that were, the fall of Assad has been seen by many people as victory. So it was a very happy event for so many people, a huge moment of relief and celebrations. The Syrians have endured so much through the years. They lost their homes, their families. They've been imprisoned, tortured, and displaced. So seeing Assad finally out of power felt like a long-awaited justice. On the other hand, the victory came through an Islamist group led by Mohammed al-Jolani, who was once a member of Al-Qaeda. And this has raised a lot of concerns, actually, not just for Syrians, but also for a lot of people around the world, because Jolani has rebranded himself, and he presented himself differently. He has this new costumes, new face, new way of thinking, new discourse, making promises about the stability of the region, and making promises also about a better future. But many people are finding it very hard to believe, and also finding it very hard to trust, given his past and the groups he comes from. It's very troubling and it's very hard to believe. While Assad is gone, this new leader raises a whole new set of questions and concerns. So sadly, the situation in Syria has deeply divided the Syrian people. After Assad's fall, there's been a split between those people who refuse to accept him, to accept Jolani as a legitimate leader or a legitimate president, and they believe that his rise to power is unjustified. And there are other people who are very happy to see him in power, and they see him as someone who could potentially provide a sense of unity after years of destruction and instability. So yeah, the situation is crazy there between people who are happy and people who are not happy. And adding to that, there's also a big concern today about how this person, Jolani, and his group, his Islamist group, will deal with or will treat minorities and other types of Muslims who don't belong to his ideology, his sectarian views. So many Syrians are worried about this leadership and how it might affect Christians, Alawites, Kurds, Druids, and others. And in addition, of course, to that, there is also the worry about a rise of new political Islam in the region. So yes, we got rid of Assad, but we have now this new problem, which could potentially lead to other problems and other instabilities in the region, in Syria, and actually in the region across the Middle East. So the fear is still there. It could also ignite new conflicts, and it could also deepen the divides and the sectarian divisions in society, and could also fuel extremist ideologies in the Middle East and also globally, as I mentioned. Maybe we can take a moment to watch this really funny video that went viral when Annalena Baerbock, the foreign minister, Germany's foreign minister, visited Syria. And during her visit, Giuliani did not accept to shake hands with her. Let's have a look.
Schon als ich angereist war, war mir jedenfalls klar, dass es hier offensichtlich nicht gewöhnliche Handschläge geben wird. Aber ebenso war klar, ich glaube auch meinen Gesprächspartnern, dass nicht nur ich, sondern der französische Außenminister das nicht teilt. Und entsprechend hat der französische Außenminister ja auch keine Hände weitergereicht.
This video and her visit to Syria was a bit troubling to me, to myself actually, because she talks about peace in the region and how important to, keep the peace in Syria. At the same time, we know her views about what's happening regarding the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and what's happening in Gaza. What do you think, Juliana?
It's just funny to watch the West kind of trying to twist the situation. The downfall of al-Assad is a great event on one hand, but it's also something that the West forced onto the country still, kind of. And they created, in general, in the Middle East, so many of radical groups. And to see them kind of go there and act like they are vis-a-vis with an equal politician, like, because they have to play this pretend game where it's like, you see, we are on the right side of history kind of thing. It's always ridiculous. In any other case, she would have said it's devastating that they're not shaking my hand and so on, but they have to be careful in these situations. That's who were your allies, so you cannot just backstab them at the first visit. But yeah, I think in terms of Syria, what is interesting to me, what I read a lot, was not so much about what happened last year, but what happened like previous years, where I figured that the US has already taken kind of the oil reserves. Once you have the most important resource of a country, it's just a matter of time until the government collapses, because their people will be dissatisfied in the long term, because you will get poorer and poorer and poorer, right? Because your greatest resource is not yours anymore. So the prehistory, I think that's something important for the West, because this is where we learn something about ourselves. I have no good overview of the region, and I think you summed it up perfectly for people like I, who have no idea of who is what and how the society is viewing the situation currently. But my question is, like, is it going to be like this government now? Is there going to be like democratic elections? Like, because I haven't heard any of those things. So
That's a very
what's
good question.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a very, very good question. Everyone was expecting him and waiting him in every interview to say something about democracy. And in every interview, we keep on listening and listening. Any democratic word? No, none, zero. No democracy, no nothing. He keeps on, manipulating. He's very good in his speeches, how he speaks. Yeah, we will be good with Europe, we'll be good with the Gulf, we will good with Saudi, Iran. We are friends with everyone, we can be allies with everyone. But then when you nothing about the situation in Syria, nothing about democracy, nothing about any democratic process, political process where we have elections and everything. He keeps on saying, yes, we need time. Last time he said, we need like 4 years to rebuild this country before we have elections. So what does that mean? We will have this for 4 years, and actually every day crazy things are happening. People are dying, people are being killed. We don't know who is doing this and who's doing that. No one knows anything. No media coverage, unfortunately, because people are very happy with this major event. Seeing Assad's gone is in itself a big thing. People are still trying to know what happened to the imprisoned people, to the people who disappeared, people who know. So no real discussions about democracy. Nothing is happening. A lot of people are trying to do things. I mean, citizens are trying to do things. They are trying to organize themselves in parties and do some civil work and things like that. But there's nothing real now that can be discussed. So yeah, I'm not happy at all with what's happening there, and I'm not seeing anything good for the future. I'm happy for the people that at least they got rid of this criminal, corrupted regime. But what's going to happen next, no one knows actually. I'm going to be brave here and say, no, I don't see any democracy in the future. Maybe if we can now move on to a different topic. We have so many things to discuss. So maybe we can touch upon very quickly on what's happening in Gaza. As of January 2025, the fight is still going on. Like last year, Israel is continuing airstrikes in Gaza and other parts. It causes a lot of damages and many, many deaths. There are still efforts, of course, to achieve a kind of ceasefire, but the violence isn't stopping. And on top of that, Israel is also carrying other attacks in the region, including Syria. Maybe now we can shift to the US. We have so many news from the US. It looks like we're heading into a new era with Trump back in charge. Yay. There has been a lot of talk about his foreign policy and his new plans, and some of the ideas he's pushing are pretty bold. One of the big ones is his idea about Greenland in Canada. He's suggesting that the US should try to make Greenland part of the US, and even he proposed that Canada should be a state. This is huge change from what we've seen in the past, and it's really making people nervous, including people who are not Americans. Everyone in the world is nervous today. So this is a change from what we've seen before, what we've seen in the last years. Trump is also talking about getting more involved in places like the Middle East and in Eastern Europe. So even sending more troops to the Middle East. So I don't know what that means for the future. What do you think, Juliana?
What to say? It's like a parallel universe where it's I don't know. It feels like an episode of The Simpsons or something, for real. Because it's so insane. It's so insane, and he's not even a president yet, and he's already talking so much weird stuff. I don't think that it's his original idea of expanding the US in that way. I think there were ideas about this which are very old already, where, people fantasized about a greater US. But yeah, I'm kind of split on the reason why he's doing that. I think one reasoning can indeed be that he's trying to take attention away from what he's actually doing by throwing people this insane bone. What I read was that he's going to propose a bill in the first 60 days to give massive tax cuts to his billionaire friends. That will then ultimately lead to people paying the price, right? So he doesn't want that in the media. I mean, I believe that. So this can be one tactic. Sending his son to Greenland looks like a PR stunt to me to kind of underline this proposal. But on the other hand, it can also be real in terms of trading routes, which is what is actually interesting here. It's not like he wants Greenland as property. It's like he wants Greenland, he wants Canada to have and the Panama Canal for the two of the most important shipping routes in the world. So that will be massive for US trading, actually. So I think that there's something truthful in this proposal, although people like to just say it's a complete PR stunt. I don't think it's a complete PR stunt, because he likes to push boundaries. He starts with this huge thing, and then just slowly works himself to how far can I go. So if Denmark, and by the way, in the case of Greenland and Denmark, because everyone is so, no, that's Denmark's and we stand with Denmark. Like, Denmark hasn't exactly treated the Greenlanders very nice during their occupation. So I would kind of like for Greenland to be independent from both of them, to be honest. Because if you look at I'm not going to go into that. Just if you look into the history of the Inuit people, how they have been treated by the government of Denmark, and of course the monarchy back then, you will be pretty devastated. And I think there are lawsuits going on until today about this. My solidarity with Denmark is kind of very low, to be honest, in that case. But in no way is it right then for the US to just buy it. Like, there are people living on there. You don't just buy a bunch of people. Like, this is insane. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I, I don't know. As I say, like a dystopian Simpsons episode. That's how it sounds to me. And with Canada, I don't think that Canada wants to be part of the US. Why would I give up health insurance and a social system to be part of that kind of my neighbor who is like completely going rogue for some time now? Yeah, I mean, the new Trump era will be dangerous for many reasons. It's his last term, hopefully. like we don't know, but he has a majority in the House, he has the majority in the Senate. It's his last term, hopefully. And he can go crazy now because he has nothing to lose. I think that will be pretty wild, to be honest.
Yeah, I also think it's a bit worrying. And adding to that, on the economic side, he's also being very supportive of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies. And he's somehow pushing to that kind of finance in the US. Personally, I think this is a bit worrying. The US has always played a big role in the world. So seeing these changes is really troubling, especially regarding countries that don't agree on US being controlling or being influenced by the US. We can also talk about Musk because he's been also making headlines with his news. The Department of Government Efficiency, which he says is going to stream government processes and make things more efficient. He's claiming that it will focus on eliminating unnecessary regulations. I don't know what that even means. And honestly, I'm not sure how much of that is really going to work. Musk keeps promising people and pushing boundaries and taking risks for no reason. But the idea of him playing a bigger role in the government seems very weird to me and sound pretty strange. It will be interesting to see how he will play things out. I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
Yeah, I mean, we have reached the point where a billionaire just openly in front of everyone has bought himself a ticket in the government, and that is very concerning, because it will start with Musk. um who says other billionaires won't do the same? I mean, I bet they have done it, but they have done it behind closed doors. At least they had the decency to hide themselves, so but this is next level. This is like uh, this is absolutely devastating. And this department, he's just creating a department for its own benefit. So he will decide what regulation has to go so he can have more freedom with these companies. It's not more than that. Like, it's not a government efficiency BS. I'm sorry. It's about how to make his business more efficient while taking away regulations which are disturbing to him. This has nothing to do with the people. Like, nobody, I bet most of the regulations he will touch upon, the normal person will never have heard of it, because there's none of, because they're not multi-billionaire business owners. This is kind of the price that I guess Trump is paying for his support.
Did you listen to his interview with Alice Weidel?
I unfortunately
What do
have.
you think of it?
We can listen to 1 minute, 1.5 minutes of it. But I'm giving the people a trigger alert, okay?
There's one line where he said that Hitler was a communist.
Exactly, and she's expanding on it. I think we will play it now.
In a live stream watched by hundreds of thousands of people, Weidel casually claimed that Adolf Hitler was a socialist and even a communist. And historians were quick to respond, calling it absolute nonsense.
The biggest success after that terrible era in our history was to label Adolf Hitler as right and conservative. He was exactly the opposite. He wasn't a conservative. He wasn't a libertarian. He was a communist, socialist guy.
Now let's get one thing straight. Hitler was neither a socialist nor a communist. In fact, he hated both. His regime brutally targeted leftists, jailing and killing communists and socialists in the early days of Nazi rule. But here's the real problem. Musk didn't push back on Weidel's falsehoods. He praised her instead, calling her very reasonable and urging Germans to support the AfD.
I think Alice Weidel is a very, very reasonable person, and hopefully people can tell just from this conversation, like nothing outrageous is being proposed, just common sense. In fact, I, as I've said publicly, I think only AfD can save Germany. And I just want to be very clear about that. Only AfD can save Germany. End of story. And people really need to get behind the AfD, and otherwise things are going to get very, very much worse in Germany.
Oh my God. Like, are you kidding me? For people who are watching, to straighten the record, Hitler was not a communist. Communists died under Hitler. He didn't, and she said he created private companies. Private companies are private companies. How many of the companies like ThyssenKrupp and all of these companies are still in the hand of the same family from that time who built weapons for Hitler? Those were not state companies. He nationalized nothing. You know what I mean? He made his rich friends richer. Sounds familiar, right? He was working with private people to build an army. He was working with private people, private families who supported his politics. He didn't do shit for equality and all of those values that socialists have. And they branded the party on purpose socialist because they wanted to get the working class. That was the reason why it was called National Socialist. And it's exactly what, by the way, Weidel is doing here, is she is using the same method as he did. She's rebranding. Her party sounds more conservative, liberal. What exactly in the program of AfD is liberal? None of it.
Well, rebranding is one thing, but lying is another thing. I mean, I don't know, how can she lie easily like this? How can she call Hitler a communist? This does
To
not
be
even
honest,
make sense. And
it's
who
a
would believe
very
that?
yeah, it's a very old strategy of right wing and fascists to do that. I haven't heard this the first time. If you say, well, there's the word socialist, therefore he was a socialist, is very blunt. That's not very well educated, and no school in Germany is teaching that, by the way.
She's very smart. She's not stupid. She's not doing that because she's lying. Because she does not know. She knows. She's
Yeah.
just doing this on purpose.
But on the other hand, I mean, she is who she is. But what's up with Musk being, oh,
Exactly.
yeah, yes, right, yeah, truth. And then afterwards, he said, people in Germany should vote the AfD. So my question is, why exactly? What's the plan, Elon Musk? Why do you want Germany back in the hands of right wing fascists? Why? So Here's what has is mind blowing to me. What's his motive? He cannot be that dumb, thinking the AfD is not in many parts a fascist party. You have thousands of quotes of their members, or hundreds of quotes of their members, saying things that are exactly telling the truth about who they are, and I cannot believe that he doesn't know that. So my question is, what's his plan? To be honest.
Maybe, I don't know if we still have time, or maybe we can talk about another topic very quickly. In the US, we have another tragic event in the US. There are so many wildfires in Los Angeles, fires that have been absolutely devastating, causing major damages and forcing thousands of people to evacuate. We've spoken about this in the previous episode. Climate change is everything. I don't want to repeat what we've already spoken about, but this is a reminder of how serious the climate crisis is. And we should not forget to speak about this over and over again, and how much more we need to do to prevent or to protect people from disasters like this. The funny thing is that, like every other event, every other similar event, people are dealing with it as another natural event, which is not. These wildfires were partly fueled by extreme heat conditions and winds, which have become more frequent due to climate change. So we have the dry seasons in California, and we have the wildfires that are becoming more intense. There are so many indicators that this is becoming more connected to climate change. Maybe we can watch a video that shows the extent of the destruction in LA. Very sad and unbelievable. When I heard about it, I didn't expect to see this. Actually, the extent is really, really huge, and thousands of people have evacuated and are still afraid until this moment, because in some places are still going on the fires.
I think there are a lot of questions with these wildfires, to be honest. Like how the local government hasn't filled up the water reserves. So firefighters ran out of water to fight the fires. And if you see, like, especially in the US, people are devastated, but they also are very angry at this whole situation. Because wildfires in LA is not new, or in California, so to say. So how can you be so fucking unprepared for it? Like not having water. The wind was here the biggest problem, I guess, but also the fire spread from three sides, which is which is a huge problem. And I'm very sorry for, let's say, like the common people who lost their homes. It's I mean, a lot of Hollywood stars lost their homes, but they make it through. But what I read was that so many people got thrown out of their fire insurance before this happened, and it was not long before, like a month or two. So there are a million people who have no insurance, so they will not get any money back, and they will not be able to rebuild their houses. So this is a huge problem, and it shows again the failures of this US system, and also points again to the insurance companies in the US being very, very corrupt, to be honest. And we didn't have it in the episode, but we also had, of course, the Luigi topic with the health insurance guy who got killed in New York, and people celebrating Luigi rather as a hero than as a murderer. And this wildfire situation shows why, because the insurance companies are screwing people over, and they're paying, high fees, and then the insurance company just throws you out, and your house burns down in an area where wildfires are usual, and then you have lost everything, like literally everything. And it's very sad. But I have to add, I saw a video. I don't know if you saw that. Pamela Anderson was on stage with Jamie Lee Curtis. And Jamie Lee Curtis said, "It's so devastating. My neighborhood looks like Gaza." And Pamela Anderson was like, "Did she just say that?" Like she was looking like, "Oh my god." That was pretty wild, to be honest. Like, oh, well, your luxurious $5 million home burned by wildfire reminds you of Gaza.
Yeah, Pamela was amazed. I was like, what is she saying? What is she talking about? It's unexpected. Yeah, I've seen this. Yeah, it's very, very, very sad. We still have one topic for this episode before we finish. Yeah, Africa. And recently there has been a lot of controversy about Macron and his statement and his comments about colonialism. Maybe we can watch a video before we start talking about this.
Et donc, cette espèce de combination de faux intellectuels manipulant les réseaux sociaux, utilisant le désarroi d'une jeunesse et les intérêts de la Russie ou d'autres en Afrique, soyons lucides, mais n'y cédons pas. Et donc, dans ce contexte-là, non, la France n'est pas en recul en Afrique. Elle est simplement lucide, elle se réorganise. Je crois qu'on a oublié de nous dire merci. C'est pas grave, ça viendra avec le temps. L'ingratitude, je suis bien placé pour le savoir, c'est une maladie non transmissible à l'homme. Mais je le dis pour tous les gouvernants africains qui n'ont pas eu le courage, vis-à-vis de leurs opinions publiques, de le porter, aucun d'entre eux ne serait aujourd'hui avec un pays souverain si l'armée française ne s'était pas déployée dans cette région.
That's he's not only asking people to say thank you, he's blaming them because they forgot to say thank you. Thank you, France, for your role in our colonial history. Sorry, we forgot to say that.
Exactly. But that's so typical white colonialists. It's like, we brought you oppression, but we also brought you infrastructure,
Polarization.
Civilization, you barbaric, people. Yeah, I mean, that's so desperate. Like he sounds desperate while saying this, right?
Yes, it's frustrating actually to see this kind of attitude, especially that the impacts of colonialism are so visible until this moment, and they are still ongoing. It's not like something that happened only in the past and that's it. It's like still going on. So yeah, it's really frustrating.
Macron reacts to something that's happening in Africa, right? Like a decolonization process where African countries are starting to decide for themselves, and that's what's irritating to Europeans is when African countries want to make their own decisions. I think one great news was that. Ghana started with a visa-free process where they open borders, and they make it easier for people to work across Africa and so on. Like basically what we have in the EU, and there are all sorts of benefits to that. Such a process seems to be starting in Africa right now. Also, the demilitarization from a French from French occupation, basically in we have here the countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and soon Ivory Coast, Senegal, and Chad. So they're starting to throw out their colonizers. So this is a very positive thing, not for the European colonizers, but for Africa. And I think one big example of that process being ultimately killed by the West was Libya and Gaddafi and his great ideas for African currency, for an African bank, for open borders here. I used to, back then, I read like the Green Book of Gaddafi. Like he wrote some essays, and it was very interesting to read that because he had some very advanced ideas about Africa. And ultimately, that made clear to me why he was such a huge problem for the West, because Africa is a huge continent. Like, the fact that Africa is shown way smaller on maps than it usually is. If Africa unites and has its own currency and so on, it will, and with so many resources and so on, they could become very, very, very powerful. And the West has been successful until now to not let that happen. But ultimately, I wish for Africa to reach that goal at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very happy for the news in Africa, but as you said, I mean, there's a lot of work that should be done, and yeah, I hope to see that in Africa one day.
I think we have one more example of colonialist fight.
We're in the middle of a vote.
Mr. Speaker, I
Hang
call that a
on.
personal vote.
Don't sit down. We're in the middle of a vote.
Mr. Speaker,
A party vote has been called for. There's a process here.
New Zealand National,
49 votes in favour.
New Zealand Labour,
34 votes opposed.
Te Pāti Māori. E ono ngā pōti e whakahe. Hawana!
No, don't.
Whakatamanu whiriti a koe au. Ah, kamata, kamata,
The House is suspended until the ringing of the bells.
Wow.
You know what? This guy who said the house is suspended until the ringing of the bell. He is such a he's kind of colonialism personified, in my opinion, because he sits there. He's so annoyed by this. Like his look is like, oh God, these people, like but yeah, you see, like in everywhere in the so-called global south are fighting for their rights, right? So in Australia, the Maori people have had a treaty which gave them certain rights to preserve their culture and their land, and now the right-wing leaning government wants to pass a bill where they it's kind of more like a reinterpretation of the original treaty, which on one hand it's good if you say everyone is equal in front of the law, but for them there is too much room for interpretation what that means. Their property gets seized and so on, and their culture gets oppressed over time. So that's the struggle they have. But maybe at a later point we have some updates about that, because I don't know how this story has progressed. I think they're still fighting.
Yeah, I mean, I was amazed by what the mainstream Western media was saying about this, because this was very peaceful. But even though they were calling them names, barbaric, so we don't have violence here, it's very peaceful act of resistance, very peaceful act of, asking for recognition. And even though same narrative with different excuses and arguments are being used against them. So yeah, it's sad. It's very sad, actually. What about 2025? How do you feel? What do you think? What is going on? Where are we heading?
I think this year's will be kind of like a next chapter. I believe that not everything will happen within this year, but that, I mean, let's call it like a new cycle with Trump taking office, and also Germany's election will be very crucial for Germany and Europe. I get sick to my stomach thinking about this election, because it will be the turnout will be very ugly, I guess. I'm happy if it's the CDU and not the FD at the end, kind of, just not the FD pass the CDU, and then it's fine. And then I hope the CDU would really stick to their word to never govern the country together with the AfD. This is something where I'm holding my breath a bit, because I kind of tend also to not believe politicians when they say something. So it will be another sad year for the left. That's what I believe too, because we're really struggling to give our kind of politics a meaning. We're really struggling to counter any kind of narrative. If you can twist things as such to have people believe that Hitler was a communist, then we have a real problem. Like because our ancestors used to fight against him and not be seen as part of him, of his politics. So I think again, not a good year for left, not a good year for middle class, for it will be again a good year for billionaires, I believe. So it's not so positive, my outlook, but I guess there will be, as usual, some glimpses of light at the end of the tunnel, where some positive things will happen as well. But yeah, I think we should focus more than ever on uniting and less defragmentation, to be honest. No matter ideology or whatever, I think we as people on planet Earth have to really get our shit together, because those few very powerful and very rich people have the upper hand right now, and that's not going to end up.
This is the only way to do anything actually today. Yeah, and also I agree on everything you said, and I can't help but feel that 2025 is going to be a year full of challenges and changes, and it's not going to be a good year for the left, exactly as you said. And I'm trying to be positive, which is very, very difficult for me now, but let's say I'm also helpful that some kind of change can come from these difficult times. Thank you, Juliana, and for the people who are watching us, thank you for joining us today, and hopefully we'll be back with more updates soon. Until then, take care.